Due on sale clause.
Okay.
Let's go. Skip the jokes.
7, yeah.
And go
All right,
straight
so
to me.
buying a house, subject to, is a great way to buy houses. Watch the previous episodes of Grant Teach Me Something, because we do go into more detail on how subject to purchasing works. But what it essentially boils down to is, let's say that Ryan here has a house for sale. Maybe he's in foreclosure, whatever. We're going to buy the house from Ryan. I'm going to buy it from him. The deed is going to transfer to my name, but we're going to leave the mortgage in Ryan's name. In other words, we buy the house, we become the owner of the house, but we're going to take over on the payments. Now, as I say in other videos, don't tell your seller you're going to take over on payments, and you'll watch those videos to understand why I say that. But we're going to continue to pay Bank of America or Wells Fargo on his behalf, but we become the owner of the property. The thing is when we buy that property, that's a sale. And a sale of that property triggers a clause that's in every mortgage, that's in the Wells Fargo mortgage, that's in the Bank of America mortgage, that says when the seller sells a property or any of their interest in the property, the bank has the option, not the obligation, but the option to ask for the remainder of that mortgage to be due at any point in time.
Now, is that buried like on page 73 in very small print, or is it obvious?
It depends. It's in the due on, or I'm sorry, it's in the due on sale clause, right? It's in the deed of trust, and that's where you're going to find it. And it kind of depends on the different banks as to where it's in there. But the deed of trust is basically what it's going to say. It's going to be a bunch of legalese, but it says, you know, if you sell any interest herein thereof of your, you know, owners, blah 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 blah, the bank has the option to ask for the remaining principal to be paid.
So I'm not a lawyer, you're not a lawyer,
Right.
consult lawyer peoples.
Yes.
That said, if there's this clause in the deed of trust and you do a subject to, is that legal?
Yes, it is absolutely legal. So the thing is that, and that's why I am very specific when I use the word trigger, that we trigger the due on sale clause. I think too many times people go out and they kind of mistakenly say you have violated the due on sale clause, right? We're not violating the due on sale clause. It doesn't say do not sell your property, and if you do, then bad things will happen. It says if you sell your property, then we have the option to do this, right? We are triggering that clause that's in that deed of trust. Furthermore, for instance, the Texas State Property Code has an entire section in it about selling and buying houses with underlying liens still in place, right? There are right ways to do these things, but most of the realtors out there, most of the very conventional in this box kind of people have been so used to, if it's outside of my box, that means it's illegal. So a lot of times, especially from realtors, they're the worst about this particular issue, where they'll hear you start talking about something creative, and they'll say, oh, you can't do that because it's illegal. And then that word spreads, and people think that it's illegal, and it's not. It's not illegal. You are triggering a due on sale clause. There is legal ways to go about doing things, but you've got to do certain things. You've got to have disclosures. You've got to make sure everybody understands what's going on.
So the due on sale clause is more of a guideline type thing versus a hard set breaking the rule if you don't do it, or trigger it or whatnot. Because if it doesn't get triggered, it's like, hear no evil, see no evil type thing.
I mean, it is triggered by a sale, right? So otherwise, like if you just have your mortgage out there and you're just paying on it every month, it doesn't matter because you're not triggering that due on sale clause. When you sell the property subject to, in other words, when you sell the property and you're saying, you know, hey, I'm no longer the owner of the property, but I'm going to keep the mortgage in my name, and you know, the investor's going to become the owner now. That is a transfer of deed, and that's what triggers the due on sale clause in the mortgage.
So if that's the I mean, it seems pretty straightforward of what it is and how it's triggered. How is there a sub-to industry at all? Because aren't all of them being just triggered left and right?
They are, and absolutely. So that's part of what happens when we are doing a subject to deal. Proper disclosure is paramount. Now, historically speaking, we don't see the due on sale clauses being called, historically speaking. Because at the end of the day, what does the bank want? What does the bank want at the end of the day?
Money.
They want money. And they want their payments, and they want their interest. That's why they're in this. The joke I always make is that if the bank wanted real estate, they'd be called Caldwell Banker. They wouldn't be called Bank of America, right? They want their money and they want their payments. That's why they're in this. So as long as, historically speaking, as long as they're getting their payments, they're happy. Now, my office, and I'm calling on the experience of my partner, Scott Horn, who's done this for 35 years now. You know, we've seen 15,000 plus of these deals come through our office, and fewer than 10 due on sale clauses ever get called. the chance of it actually happening is extremely, extremely slim.
Right.
Because the bank, as long as we're doing things right, that is handling insurance right, and I should add that to our list of things to talk about. Handling the insurance right, making sure that the payments are being made, that kind of stuff. As long as that's happening, historically speaking, they're not calling those notes.
So I'm going to use a bad analogy,
Okay.
and you can tell me if it's a really bad analogy or if it's close.
Terrible analogy.
So the speed limit is 60 miles per hour. And everybody goes 73, but no police pull over because there's kind of like that window, and they don't really care unless you're going like 100 or 80 plus or whatever. So is the due on sale clause kind of like a speed limit to where if it's overtly obvious, then they're going to give the ticket?
I can see the analogy. There you go, Mr. Analogy Man here. So I can see where that would be used, and it's not too dissimilar to that. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are really on top of what's going on, with disclosures, with making sure that the seller understands what they're getting into, and all that kind of fun stuff. We just need to make sure that they are okay with understanding this could happen. Right? If you go 70 in that analogy, you understand if you go 65, you could get pulled over and you could get a ticket.
Right.
Right? It's not likely, historically speaking, so it's not a bad analogy, right? But if you shove it in their face and you drive by a cop at 80, yeah, they're probably going to pull you over, right?
Right.
Because
like if you're blatantly going, I own this house,
Right.
they're playing going to be like, okay.
Right, okay, we have to do this. So that's the thing. So again, just to kind of go through our points here, it's in every mortgage, and it's not literally in every mortgage, but it's in enough mortgages that I'm comfortable saying it's in every mortgage, right? So just understand if you're doing a due on sale, or if you're doing a subject to deal, you are going to have to deal with due on sale clause. It is unlikely that it gets called, but part of our disclosure is making sure that a seller understands, look, historically speaking, I use historically speaking all the time, historically speaking, we aren't seeing these things get called. As long as we keep on top of payments, I tell the seller the same thing I told you. What does the bank want?
Right.
They want their payments.
Right.
They would be called to a banker, not Bank of America, that kind of stuff. So drawing it out and telling them, but then letting them know, worst case scenario here, the bank may choose at any point in time from this time forward, they may choose to ask for the remaining principal to be paid off. And if that happens, we all need to understand that it's all hands on deck. Everybody's going to have to pitch in. We're all going to need to work together. We're all going to need to be communicating over the phone. We're going to need to be communicating and making stuff happen. Because on those times that the due on sale clause has been called that we've seen, through none of them has it actually led to a foreclosure or something like that, right? We've been able to fix it somehow, some way.
Because, to me, there's really only three I don't know how many options. I'm just going to spitball. One option is you dip into your piggy bank and pay them. The second option is you dip into your lenders, your private capital, and pay them off. Maybe you refinance it out of it with somebody else. You don't have any money and you get foreclosed on. And the other option is you call the bank and be like, do you want money or do you want nothing?
Right.
I mean, there's probably more options, but just
and
not being familiar with the whole due on sale clause issue, off the top of my head, that just seems kind of like the obvious outputs.
And those are definitely, you hit basically all of them, except one other option is basically transferring the property back into seller's name momentarily, then using a trust, transferring the property into a trust, and then selling the trust to your end.
That's why Grant is from Creative Cash Flow.
CreativeCashflow.com, yes.
Because I mean, who would ever think to do that? But like, oh, by the way, Bob and Sue, I know you don't really own this property more, and we're making payments on your behalf, and you're getting the good credit aspects, which obviously watch some of the other videos and you can kind of understand what I'm talking about there. But it's like, hey, you're doing us a solid by owning this house for like a minute.
Right. Yeah. And it's not even that we're doing them a solid, because here's the thing: is ultimately, if the due on sale clause gets called. So let me back up one more level out. One of the big benefits to doing subject to is how little liability we have on it personally, right? Because we own the house, but we don't own the actual debt. So if something were to happen, and if there was a foreclosure on that debt, who gets affected by that?
The homeowner.
The
seller.
The seller does, right? Even though they don't own the house anymore, their name is on that debt. So if a foreclosure occurs, they're the ones that are going to get hurt by it, okay? Now, For us, that's somewhat of a benefit because, hey, our risks are limited. But from a moral and ethical standpoint, we've got to do everything in our power to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we're protecting our sellers, we're protecting our buyers, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So in the case of a due on sale clause, we do want to take certain steps to try and remedy this, right? And one of those steps, like you said, can we get our buyer to refinance? If our buyer is right there ready to refinance, that pays everybody off. There's no big deal at that point in time anyway, right? Another step would be, can we, through our own capital or through private money, pay off the underlying mortgage, right? That's another one that you hit the head on the nail on the head with. And then if neither one of those are options, you can look and you can say, can the seller refinance? Is the seller have the ability to refinance, or do we want to transfer this property back into seller's name momentarily? And again, to give full credit, this is a strategy that Scott created, Horn.
Scott created Horn?
Scott created Horn. Scott Horn created. Transferring the property back into the seller's name momentarily. Then that satisfies the banks at that point in time. And this has been used 2 or 3 times in this situation. That keeps the bank happy. Now, once that's been transferred back in, then putting that property into a trust. Same kind of way, leaving the mortgage alone, but deeding the property into a trust, and then making the beneficial interest of that trust. In other words, making the owner of the trust our end home buyer who wanted to live in that property in the first place. So now our buyer doesn't own the property; they own the thing that owns the property.
I feel like I should say, I think we need another button. We need a series of buttons.
I'm not a lawyer
This
button.
is the A, or Grant is not a lawyer. Ryan is not a lawyer. Grant nor Ryan is your financial planner,
Right.
nor your CPA, nor your friend. No, we're your friends. No, but like something like this sounds pretty legit, sounds pretty creative. Creative cash flow. But at the same time, it's like, that seems like there's a lot of dots, a lot of T's that you have to cross.
There's a lot of stuff that needs
because
to
it
go
seems
on.
like when you do something like that, and again, I don't know about this strategy, but you open yourself up for just potential lawsuits, potential somebody screwing you over by, oh, it's my house again, run away.
Right.
You know, all those type of things.
Yeah, it all depends on your contracts. It all depends on your disclosures. You've got to have good contracts. You've got to be working with an attorney that knows what the heck they're doing. Don't go to these attorneys that are $300 to get all your closing done. And, I'll fix your problem for $450. Like you're going to have to pay for something if it comes down to this, right? It's just going to have to happen. But that's part of the reason why I encourage you to set back your down payments whenever you do sell it with an owner financed wrap. Like, you're going to get a 10% down payment. Set that money aside so that you've got a rainy day fund in case something like this pops up.
Right.
Again, and I want to be very clear here, the likelihood of this ever actually happening is extremely slim. Again, we've seen fewer than 10 called over a 35-year period with over 15,000 transactions in this manner done, right? The chances of it actually happening are very slim, but it's very important that we understand how to handle it if it does happen, right?
But again, I think there's a lot of fear factor there as well. Like, oh, I don't want to do this because what if they do on sale and I don't have $200,000 to pay?
Right.
So I think it's a good topic there to bring it up. Flip side, what are some ways that if you do this, you will get a sale dude clause?
Yeah, and I
clause
can't
dude?
necessarily go through if you do this, you will. But I think Helen asked a good question of, can you tell circumstances of times the due on sale clause actually did get called and what happened in those times, right? So I can't say like there's an if-then relationship on this is what you're going to do to get the due on sale clause done. I can say that if you do your insurance incorrectly, that's going to be one of the more likely scenarios that due on sale clause is going to be called. So I'm going to take a moment right now. I want you guys, if you've got a notepad, piece of paper, pull it out, start writing this down, because this is going to be something that you'll need to reference in getting things done the right way. And that is, your insurance has to have the right people in the right place, right? The names have to look correct. The bank, the Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, they need to see your seller's name on that mortgage, okay? So we're going to look at the scenario of buying a house subject to, and then we'll look at a scenario of buying a house subject to and then subsequently selling it with an owner-financed wraparound mortgage to an end buyer. So here's the thing. When you do insurance on a sub-2 property, the owner of the property needs to be the quote-unquote named insured, okay? That's going to be the person who's actually got the insurance. So you buy it subject to, that's going to be your company name or your name. Then there needs to be what's called an also insured or an additional insured. It's different with each insurance company as to what they call it. That field needs to be your seller's name.
Right.
Okay,
and they need to be on there because the bank needs to see that their liabilities is covered.
Exactly. And just to be clear, I talk about this in other videos as well, I will always use the verbiage of seller, meaning the person who sold it to me, and buyer, meaning the person that buys it from us. Okay? So your seller is the also insured, you are the named insured. And then there's going to be a primary mortgagee, and that's going to be Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whoever. Okay? That one's fairly simple. Now, if you're going into a situation where you buy it sub 2 and then you're turning around and you're selling it with an owner finance wrap to somebody, this is what it needs to look like. The owner of the property, who is now your wrap buyer, needs to be the named insured. The also insured or additional insured needs to be the seller's name. Okay? Then you've got a primary mortgagee, who is Wells Fargo or Bank of America, and now you have a secondary mortgagee, and the secondary mortgagee is going to be your company name, the one that bought it sub 2 and subsequently sold it with a wrap. That's going to be the secondary mortgagee. Yes?
What if you use private money to buy this property?
None of this. Well,
like, let me. I'm throwing a ratchet, a wrench into your system, or not system, but so say it's a sub 2. The mortgage was 80 or whatever, and they wanted to walk away money of like 20, and you're like, well, shit, I'll just get a lender to toss me over 20.
Right.
Now they need to be insured as well, right?
Yeah, so that also depends on your situation with your lender as to how they need to be seen.
Because they would be like the second lien.
Yeah, but they're kind of behind the scenes on that. When you're talking about with a wraparound with your buyer has one mortgage. Your buyer doesn't see that you owe your lender $20,000. They see that they owe your company $100,000, right? So their mortgage is really with you. When they get that payoff, part of your responsibility when you get the... So that example, right? It was an $80,000 Wells Fargo loan, $20,000 to private lender LLC, okay? So now our basis, our company's in it for $100. Right. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to sell it to somebody for whatever, $120 or whatever. $300,000 trillion. We're going to sell it to them. When that person now has a mortgage to us, to our LLC, Investor LLC, that person has a mortgage to Investor LLC for $100,000, or $115,000. Right. Okay, that gives you some room. It gives you $15,000 on top. So their mortgage is to Investor LLC for $115,000. All they see is I have a mortgage with a note and deed of trust to Investor LLC for $115,000. That's all they see.
Right, because that's all they care about.
That's all they care about, right? Now, we understand and we disclose to them through our contracts that there are underlying liens to Wells Fargo and to our private money lender.
Got it.
Okay? Now, if we get a payoff from our buyer for $115,000, that means we get to keep $15,000, $20,000 goes to our lender, and $80,000 goes to the bank, and that's how that would occur at that point in time. But as far as insurance is reflected, our insurance is being reflected as a mortgage for our buyer, and thus our buyer only sees their mortgage to us with Investor LLC.
Got it.
So we put that, and then because the bank needs to see their name on it, we put that there as well.
And this is where I would say, get yourself a trusty partner that is an insurance person, and you call them up and you say, I need insurance, here's what's going down. And if they know their profession, they will tell you what you need to do, or you could just come back and rewatch this loop for about 1,000 times, and maybe you'll understand it. Because I'm sitting 3 inches away from him, and I'm like...
You got the glazed, yeah.
My face is melted.
Well, and I want to be very clear, too, and so, and we've got a question to go back through the people on, the placement of people on insurance. You can rewind for that after this is done, but I'll go really quickly. On a wraparound, you've got your named insured as the owner, you're also insured as your seller. Your primary mortgagee is the bank, your secondary mortgagee is your LLC that created the mortgage with them. It's as simple as that. Now, a lot of insurance companies are unable to handle wraps, okay? You've got to be very, very clear with whoever you're working with that that's what you need done. Because they may try to do something else, but let's be frank, they deal all day, every day with stuff that's not wraparound mortgages, and they don't understand the importance that goes behind this. So you need to find people that will be able to handle this type of insurance underwriting. We use Victor Miranda. I can't remember his contact information because the office is who handles that kind of stuff. But if you get in touch with me through my Facebook at CCF Mentors.
Thank you, Helen.
We're
already out of battery on that.
Right? Or you hit me a link on here to try to get me to remember. I can get you the contact information.
So before we get too crazy into questions, let me see if I can summarize.
Okay.
So due on sale clause is simply the documentation that's in the deed of trust when you originally, like if I'm a homeowner and I buy a house, and it simply states if I sell the house, they get their money, right? And as far as if you're in the owner finance sub-2 game, the likelihood of that ever being called, if you are correctly dotting your I's, crossing your T's, is very slim.
Correct.
And if it does get called, there are tools, there are ways that you can prevent it actually having to go to the point where you have to cut that check.
Right.
Okay.
So you do want to handle those things. That's good. So
and then as far as and crossing your I's, dotting your T's, make sure that everybody that needs to be insured is insured.
Right.
That's one of the quickest way to get them bells and sirens going off. Hey, give us our money.
Right. Exactly.
Cool.
So I want to address a couple of questions before we move on, because we've got a couple of questions in here, and then I'm going to talk about trusts. I'm going to talk about proper disclosure to kind of close us out here. So the one question that we got was from Jimmy Marin saying, when a due on sale clause is acted upon, can the seller back out? And here's the thing, no. Okay, so when the seller sells you the property, part of the deal is that you now have full control over that asset, right? That's part of the deal of subject to, is when you buy the property, you have full control of everything, and the seller, frankly, doesn't have any control over everything. And I'm making Miranda crazy because I keep saying Frank. You can't be Frank, you're Grant. Ha, ha, ha. So they can't...
But not that Grant.
So they can't back out. They can't choose to do anything because they already signed everything over to you in the first place. This is why I say it's so important to morally and ethically make sure that you are going to be the person that takes care of your sellers and takes care of your buyers. Again, I've said this in other previous videos, but I think it's very important. A phrase to work into all of your mission statements is that you're going to do the right thing, especially when it's not in your best interest. This is one of those areas. Even when it sucks and you have to use your private money that you didn't really want to use on refinancing out of a due on sale clause, do it, because that's going to be what protects your seller's credit. And you have nothing if you don't have your name in this business. So really make sure that you take care of them. So yes, they do not have any more control. You have full control. The only thing that gives them control back is if you don't pay and they foreclose on you. That's the only time that the seller gets their control back in this situation.
So Trenton, do you have an insurance company you'd recommend? I will subtle plug. I don't need a button, but because it's not my company. I use Kim Stallings of Heritage Risk Advisors. Who do you like?
That's Victor Miranda, and I don't know that Kim can do wraps. I know that she's great at what she does, but again, you need to be very specific about owner financing and wraps, and very specific about those things that I told you, what name needs to be where, and if they can or can't do that, because not everybody can, and that's not the agent's fault, it's the underwriter's fault, okay? Right. So just check into that kind of thing. And then I think I saw another one. What happens with the original homeowner's insurance? The new homeowner needs insurance. Does the original homeowner cancel their insurance and not create a problem with the bank? And yes, so what happens is when we sell the property or we buy the property, we're going to put a new insurance policy in place. And that is going to replace the insurance policy that was in escrow previously, okay? And that cancels out the old insurance policy that the seller had. Now, part of my contracts with my seller say that my seller is not going to get the refund from escrow that occurs in that event. Because there may be a situation where there's a little bit of money, and I don't want to get too far into these kind of details. These are things that you can learn at creativecashflow.com or from the upcoming Propelio Academy. But the now I've lost my train of thought.
I know, we started off bad and we got back on the rails, but we're quickly trying to jump off the rails again.
What's going to happen is when you cancel that insurance policy, the original insurance policy, there's oftentimes going to be money left in escrow at Wells Fargo, and there's going to be a check that gets cut for that money to the seller. Now, part of our contracts, part of me getting a power of attorney is properly disclosing, hey, if that occurs, we're not going to give you that money. That money is going to go and be put right back into the escrow account so that we can cover everything that needs to be covered at the end of the day. So, yes, we're canceling, we're replacing that insurance policy. Let's see, do we have any other questions? Some other circumstances of times that the due on sale has actually been called, okay? One circumstance was a small community bank got purchased by another bank, and that new bank rolled through and called like 3 or 4 due on sale clauses that we saw. Because the new bank wanted to kind of start from fresh, okay? Mm-hmm. That's an unlikely situation, but it's one that's happened. Another situation was literally a wife that didn't care how much it was going to screw up her credit to have this foreclosure occur. She wanted to screw the ex-husband's credit and called the bank and said, "You'll never guess what Frank did. He sold this house like this, and you guys are supposed to call the due on sale clause. I know it because I got disclosed," and blah, 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 and this forced the hand, made the bank call it. And then...
But prevent that. I mean, there is no preventing somebody being
There's
scorned.
no preventing stupid.
But it's
Scorned,
just
yes.
scorned. But it's, I'm imagining it's proper communication with your seller.
Yeah, so when I buy with sellers, I'm very clear with them. Let me take over on the communications with the bank from here out, because I do this all day, every day. Right. Like, we understand how to talk to how to talk to the banks. So just let us, and how you spin that as I say spin, that's the wrong word. How you brand that as a positive for them is you say, you know, once we purchase the house, you never need to think about this loan again. That's the whole reason why we're doing the power of attorneys and the authorization to release, is that you should be able to completely wipe your hands. Yes, of course, the loan is still in your name, but A, my good payments are being reported to your credit, right? So that's going to help you. Mm-hmm. And then B, we don't want you to have to deal with anything else. If you ever get a letter, if you ever get a call, if you ever get anything from the bank, just let my office know and we'll take it and run from there, right? That kind of thing. So being very clear about that. The last situation that I can talk about with seeing a due on sale clause was literally, I don't know. I have one loan that I don't know if it was a due on sale clause being called or not. And the long story short is the bank just stopped talking to us and stopped accepting payments. I could not get through to the bank, even with the seller on the line. It was the strangest thing. So to stop messing with it, they weren't even going to foreclosure, but they just weren't accepting our payments, and we were getting back payments logged up. To stop messing with it, I just got one of my private lenders to refinance me out of that underlying lien. Now, again, that's going to be a topic that actually has some detail that goes into it that we can't talk about today, but you can learn through some of the other videos as well.
So, real quick, so if I've got, since we are talking about due on sale clauses, if you are doing a wrap, is that a clause that you actually throw in on your sales contract?
So yeah, are you talking about when you buy the property?
You've already bought it. Mm-hmm. I know there's a due on sale clause to bank A.
Right.
But then
you're selling it to your buyer.
I'm selling it to my buyer.
Yeah. So with your buyer's contracts, there's a lot of disclosure in there about, yes, you're buying it from me for a $115,000 mortgage, but you're actually not in first lien position. There are these other liens that are ahead of you, my investor and the bank. And part of this lien with the bank is a due on sale clause that they can decide to just call, right? So you've got to properly disclose to your seller and your buyer that this is a possibility from any point forward. They can call it. It's not like it has to be called in the first 6 months. At any point in time, they can call that due on sale clause. Mm-hmm. So that's proper disclosure to both people. One thing about the deal here with Nicole asking, so the buyer needs to have insurance of your choice, and that's where I'm going to stop, is that it's not the insurance of your choice. The buyer has full, legally, control over who they want to get their insurance through, okay? They get to choose their insurance. However, we get to approve or disapprove the insurance, okay? So we know how difficult it is to find insurance agents that can handle things the right way, so we pose that to our seller or to our buyer as, look, our insurance needs to be done very specifically. These are people that we use that we know can do things the right way, right? And we'll get them hooked up with those insurance agents and have them go through that process. But legally, the buyer has every option to go to whoever they want for their insurance. But when they get that insurance, they need to bring it to us, and we have to look it over and say, does it have these things that meet our requirements? And if it does, we're cool. If it does not, then we can reject it and get those things added in. Okay.
Corey Thompson has a really interesting, Sidewinder for you. Sidewinder? And he's like, you buy the house, your seller dies, your power of attorney dies. Now the bank won't communicate to you, but is asking for documents.
Right. So that could be a situation. I mean, and there's so many nuances to that. Now, I've got like 3 mortgages right now of dead people in my portfolio. One person literally died. I can't remember if it was the same day. I think it was within a few hours of closing. They like often died. It was it's pretty crazy.
But how's their credit now?
But
I'm just kidding. Death is always a shitty thing.
You know, but honestly, on that particular deal, it was he knew he was going to be dying. And that was part of why he was selling. Is frankly, he didn't want his son to get any money. He wanted it to go to the grandson. And so by selling it to us, we were able to set up a trust for him and able to set up a way to where our payments to him, because he had some equity in that deal, our payments to him were ultimately going to go to the grandson. So we all knew that it was going to happen, but ultimately it did happen.
So it sounds like we need to have a future episode about trusts.
Well, yeah, so trusts are one of those areas that can be complicated. We're actually going to talk about that here in just 1 second. But with those, when you have a subject to with somebody who's passed away, most of the time the bank does not get notification of that passing, and if they're still getting their payments, then there's no real pushing of the issue, right? So you can just continue to pay on those. And we do file our POAs and our authorization to release information, whenever we buy the house. So that is on file with the bank at that point in time, and then they know that they're allowed to talk to us moving forward. So we haven't run into that particular issue of the bank no longer wanting or asking for documents or stuff like that. But if that were to happen, and if they were going to be liquidating because of that case, yeah, you would have to start looking into other options like refinancing out, using collateral assignment to refinance yourself out, that kind of stuff. So that would be one option. Now, so trust. Let's move into the trust situation. Oftentimes you will.
Trust you.
Oftentimes you will hear a guru go out and talk about trust as though it's this magical thing that fixes everything and you don't have to worry about the due on sale clause anymore, and that is not true. The due on sale clause exists for everybody. Now, what they're referencing when they get into the trust issue is they're like, okay, well, if you put it into a trust, kind of like I talked about earlier, if you put it into a trust and then you assign the beneficial interest of the trust to your buyer, the bank only sees the transfer from seller to trust, and that does not violate the due on sale clause. Now, that's where they're wrong. What they're referencing is an act called the Garn-St. Germain Act. It was in the mid to late 80s. I can't remember exactly the year. But what it says is that if you transfer your house into an estate planning trust, that does not violate the due on sale clause. What was happening is there were a lot of wealthy people that wanted to transfer their property into an estate planning trust so that they could have their children or their children's children have access to this. And it was triggering the due on sale clause, and they were getting upset about that. And so they've had an act passed that said if you transfer it into an estate planning trust, that's not a violation, or not, here I am saying violation, that's not a trigger of the due on sale clause. Now, you tell me, if we're transferring a property into a trust for the purpose of getting around the due on sale clause for an investment strategy, is that an estate planning trust?
I am neither a lawyer nor a financial planner nor intelligent enough to answer that question.
Yeah, no, it's not. We're not putting it into the estate or into that trust for the purpose of creating something for their estate. So if the bank chose to dig, which they would have to do through court order, they could still get it called the due on sale clause. Now, what the trust does is provides a shield. It provides a nice little veil in front of the transaction that does add a part of protection for you. Now, I will say, in all of my portfolio, and all of the deals that I've done with my end buyers and my sellers, and also calling on like Scott and knowing, people like Daniel Klein and Sean McQuistion and all these guys who have done hundreds and hundreds of deals, a year sometimes, we don't typically go into trusts. I don't have any in my portfolio that go into a trust. I just buy it sub 2 and I sell it with a rep because historically speaking, we're not getting the due on sale clause called anyway.
Right, because I hear this, and all I think is, okay, that sounds like I got to pay an attorney to set this thing up. Right. Which, if I'm an investor, which we are, the whole reason we're doing this is to make money. If I'm paying somebody, now my pie just gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
and a lot of times the reason we are doing the sub 2 deals is because the pie is already kind of smaller than like a typical wholesale or a cash deal.
Right.
So,
and the other complication to a trust is that not only is it more money, but it's also more complicated for our buyer to understand.
Right.
If you're selling it to a buyer and you're saying, hey, you don't actually own the property, but guess what? You own the thing that owns the property. It's an added level of just confusion for them. So we don't typically do that. Now, I will say, like my personal home that I live in, I bought sub 2. and I put it into a trust. And the trust owns the property, and I own the trust, right?
But that's because you wanted to protect yourself.
But I wanted to protect myself, and I understand the intricacies of what's going on that side,
right.
and so that's where we took it.
So on that, could that be a negotiation strategy? Like if somebody's saying, if they're halfway
they're super
there,
worried about due on sale,
yeah, and they're halfway there, and you're like, look, we can put this in place, and that'll,
and then make them pay for it.
Right, but it'll even but give you added level of protection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can become another negotiation point for you. Right. Tang has a good question. What if my wrapped buyer or borrower files for bankruptcy? Do I have to keep paying on the underlying lien until they are out of bankruptcy? Yes. And I had that happen with a property over in Oak Cliff, and it sucked. I spent a lot of money on that property because they kept, and they really screwed me over. They were nice people, I liked them, but both the husband and the wife filed for bankruptcy 2 or 3 times each. So they lived in that property of mine for like a year, almost a year and a half without making a single payment. And I was having to pay $18,000, $19,000, $2,000 every month to keep that loan current because, again, I could have just backed out and said I'm done with it, and then it would have all foreclosed, and it wouldn't affect me.
You screw over the
seller. But that screws
seller.
over the seller, and that's not what we're in this business to do. I was in there to do the right thing, so I paid to keep that current for the seller. But ultimately, and like I quoted many times before, when you do have a foreclosure, when you do have a crummy situation like that, we ended up making a lot more money on that deal because once that person was out, now the property had appreciated significantly, and so I was able to capitalize on that appreciation. Whereas, once you sell it with a wrap, you don't own the property, so you don't get that ability to capitalize on appreciation. So,
subtle plug to our first video.
Yes.
Because I, at times, do pay attention. Subtle plug. In our first video, we were talking about the benefits of multiple LLCs. Mm-hmm. In that situation where they declare bankruptcy, couldn't you have foreclosed on yourself and still kick them out within like a 30-day process?
I walked into
versus waiting a year and a half?
I walked into my back office maybe once every month to have the girls remind me, is this in our, and I named our second LLC name. No, this one's just in triple equity. I'm like, gosh darn it.
Okay.
Because it was before, I actually sold this property to that person before we figured out the 2 LLC system that's referred to in that first video. So
which is tagged above or to the side or whatever.
So had we put it in that 2 LLC system, yeah, I could have been real quick with it about it, So if they had filed bankruptcy and weren't paying LLC 2, LLC 2 would have stopped paying LLC 1, we would have foreclosed here and been done with it. But that was, when I sold it to them, was before I had figured that strategy out. And so I didn't have that option, right?
Whoops.
So that's where, that's funny. My favorite guru tactics of foreclosing from second lien position to assume the loan. They say that keeps the due on sale clause at bay. It doesn't really keep the due on sale clause at bay necessarily, but I believe you're referencing, Corey, that tactic that I had just talked about creating. So yes, I'm glad you've heard about it.
Okay.
So just to finalize here and finish up, the biggest deal here is disclosure, making sure that everybody properly understands what's going on. Mm-hmm. When you're doing a subject to deal, there's so many positives for everybody on so many fronts. Again, the likelihood of something going wrong with it is very slim. The likelihood that due on sale clause gets called is extremely slim. Again, fewer than 10 in the over 15,000 deals that we've seen is not even, it's a 0.000% basically at that point, right? So don't worry too much about it, but you do need to be able to address it intelligently, and you do need to be able to disclose it intelligently, and your seller needs to be able to tell you what due on sale clause is and why it matters, and your buyer needs to be able to tell you what due on sale clause is and why it matters. And if those things are put in play, and you've got your insurance done correctly, and you're protecting yourself through things like the 2 LLC system and all that kind of stuff, you do have the ability to do trusts. Don't pay too much attention to the gurus out there that are like, trusts, they're the best thing in the world, because the thing I always quote is that that's an oft-used tactic to get you to pay for their product, because people don't really understand trust, and so it's really easy for them to be like,
something I don't understand, so they know more than me.
Exactly. I actually literally had somebody, taught a class last Thursday, and they came up asking about the trust, and this guy was telling, and I was like, oh yeah. How long after that conversation was it that he asked you to sign up for his program? Mm-hmm. And the guy was like, oh.
How long do you wait?
Right, yeah. Oh.
Don't play.
At least I've got a horn that tells you when I'm telling you to sign up for my program.
Sign up with my shit. I got a button.
So those are the topics that I want to cover. Let's look. We've got some good video or some good questions here. So let's see. We've got. I just want to address to see if we've got any more questions on this. How can I properly let everybody know what's going on when I don't properly know? Well, figure out and properly know. Either you can JV with somebody who knows, like myself, or you can go through and go through
We need another button that says overtly plugged.
creativecashflow.com and learn what you're doing with it. Or you can go to the Propelio Academy that's coming out and learn what you're doing about it. And just watch these videos that are going on here. There's a lot of information for you guys to learn.
Helen. Thank you, Helen.
There's a lot of information to learn right in front of you about how this stuff works. So you've got to know. You've got to know. And if you don't, the contracts that are coming out of somebody like Scott's office are going to disclose everything in writing. So learn those contracts, and then you should be able to get through that. But again, this is the most important part about if you're doing a sub-2 deal. You've got to be able to disclose this properly and sound intelligent, because A, you'll lose deals if you can't. And B, it's the right thing to do, okay? So if you have any more questions, just pop them in real quick, because we're going to be wrapping up here. Ryan, do you have anything to close up with?
Well, I'll just say, hey, sorry about the FUBAR at the beginning. Thanks for sticking around, letting us get into it. If you like what you saw, please give us some likes. Please give us some shares. Maybe just tell them to skip the first, 2 minutes, but it's all good. This was just because we were flustered. But please like us. Please share it. If you have ideas of what you want to see, drop them in the comments. If you have a favorite attorney, drop them in the comments. Favorite insurance, because I know I plugged my insurance. Grant plugged his insurance. If you have an insurance person you like, plug them away. Basically, what these videos are all about is trying to have more of a conversation versus us stand up here and be like, blah, blah, blah. Because, again, if you heard a second ago, like when Grant was talking about that bankruptcy case, where that house, it was before he learned a strategy. He still was doing active deals, so there's plenty of strategies out there that we're still actively learning. So at no point, you could be very knowledgeable and know what the hell's going on in this business, but not know everything. So always keep learning. Network, join the conversation with us. As far as learning goes, we are really trying to hammer home this Propelio Academy for you guys. And again, all that is just trying to give you that knowledge for free, so you can save that $30,000, that $50,000, and just learn it for free and actually have actionable items. So keep watching the videos. I have tagged the first Grant Teach Me Something, because this is the 15th one we've done this of. That's 15 weeks
awesome,
of doing this, plus 1 week where you were sick. So
that's true.
That was the week that Daniel does it better. So, I tagged it before, so if you have never seen any of these videos, go back to the first one and just chug through. Then you'll up to pace, and you should be able to do some business. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a CPA. I'm really not even that funny.
But you are good looking.
I am good looking.
Thanks for joining us, guys, and really give Propelio.com a look. If you're not a member already, you really should check them out, because they're an awesome, awesome piece of software that can really help you get more successful in this business. And that's what we all need, is we all need something that's going to help us be more successful. So I hate to put it as bluntly as that, but it's true. If you have the right resources, you have the ability to be more successful. And on that note, with the knowledge, with the Propelio Academy, creativecashflow.com, you can check me out from my website, creativecashflow.com. Learn a whole ton of stuff about this, everything from start to finish on seller financing in particular. Follow me at CCF Mentors on Facebook. Get some information that way too. But I'd love to get to know you guys. I do a weekly live Q&A for all my members Monday nights. We do a live meetup every month, and then you've got all the information and videos available for you too.
And let me be frank.
You're just saying Frank.
I just want to be frank.
Yeah, because I've said Frank about 16 times today.
Anyway, hey, thanks again for sticking around. I know we had a little issue in the beginning, but thank you so much for watching us. We'll be here next week, maybe, possibly, most likely.
We'll see. And it looks like lease-to-own options might be a good topic, because Helen has brought up.
So again, as any of these videos, if you rewatch the older videos, drop the comments, drop questions, and we will be good to get on that and answer away. So until then, we'll see you next week, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Keep on learning.